surrounding slide to slide. So this is the comic that I made. It is called Minneapolis 2020 to 2021. Whenever you're ready. If the music works. Oh, I hope it does. I will be bummed if it doesn't. There's a very important music cue to start us off. Give me a second. Give me a second. Give me a second. All right, let's try this. Oh, there's a bunch of them now. Look at the one next to the mailbox. I've seen wild turkeys before, but these ones got really bold without cars around. It's their neighborhood now. Geez, they're enormous. Look, I'm busy cleaning up my island. How is it in Minneapolis right now? My friend Mel writes. Same as anywhere, I guess. I'm trying to do stuff that doesn't involve being inside. All your mushroom pics are inspiring me. You should get into urban foraging too. Yeah? What should I try first? Well, welcome to the garlic mustard pole. Newbies, look for the tall stalks with the white flowers. Make sure you dig out as much of the root as you can and carry it around in your bags. For the adventurous, snip off that top, tender part of the stem and pop it in your mouth. It's edible, folks. From City Park? No thanks. Who knows how many dogs have peed on these things? Chop, chop, chop. This is I'll do a little description of the meal I made. This is a rice bowl with sauteed garlic mustard. My friend Mel writes, you just went to a public park? Yeah, it's legal to forage some stuff in Minneapolis parks, apparently. Lucky, I have to do it on the slide. Hey, how bad of an idea is it to eat berries from a tree outside an auto shop? Like chemicals and heavy metals? Well, berries and fruit are much safer than if you were going for a root vegetable. Try a little bit to make sure your body agrees with it first. I reduced it too much. This is what I made. It is a jam of mulberries on baguette bread. Have you tried collecting walnuts yet? No. You can find them around here? Not for a month or two, but try over by Armitage. You'll know them when you've seen them. Anyone recognize this place? This is over by Medina Tosca. It's that art installation there. Yes! This is a lot of effort for 10 walnuts tops. But they're from here! Squish, squish. We got some walnut and chocolate chip zucchini bread. Yes! This was my real acorn cracking setup for a long time. I'm happy to report I have a slightly more sophisticated one now. I can talk more about this is leaching acorn flour to make it edible. Good to see you. My friend Mel says, ready for an adventure? We've got good timing. This all popped up after all the rain we've been having. Wow. Ever had chicken of the woods? Just let them sweat in the pan for a while before you do the oil. You can't really overcook them like you can with vegetables. Okay. This is a omelet with chicken of the woods and a couple of edible flowers on top. The acorn jelly finally set. Cool, I've got some sauce to put on top. This is a real Korean recipe. You can find it online with some sauce and some banchan. We've got some more acorn flour bread right there. Long gray flakes on the bark, silver maple. I could not find my original video for this, but jishigimi wanshi. Drip, maybe serve time. And then that's the final page. That is my entry to the Okay, let's talk about it, shall we?
So let's talk about it. First of all, congratulations on
Just let me know if that changes, we can swap.
Okay. I had the opportunity to read the book, and it's a collection of comics, short essays, and recipes that explore the concept of queer food. My first question is, how did you come to work on the book, and did you want to talk about your contribution?
Yes, I can talk about it. So this was something where I was contacted by the organizers, Alex Ketchum and let me just double check the name correctly. Is it okay if I just go on this? Yeah, Alex and Megan J. Elias, Alex D. Ketchum. They're based out of Quebec. I'm pretty sure Montreal. They're academics who specialize in the ideas of like the intersection of queer identity and food. They organize a conference every year in May. So if you want to go up to Montreal, they are hosting another one in May. And they really wanted to incorporate a comic storytelling component along with prose, and they also wanted to, obviously in a book about food, it wouldn't be, it wouldn't hit quite the same if there weren't recipes. So there's also a collaboration between visual artists and cooks, professional chefs. So lots of artists contributed illustrations to go along with recipes that were made specifically for this. Mine was with, let me find it, I just saw it. Mine is goes along with a brine, spice, and roasted cauliflower recipe by Salima Dalla, which looks amazing, frankly. So, as always, the challenge with like making food look really tasty in the illustration, that's a challenge I always like to do. So, yeah, it is an anthology that is accomplishing multiple things at once.
Can you say a little bit more about the challenge of making food look yummy with a limited color palette?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that is such a challenge, and I think a lot of it comes down to the colors at your disposal and the textures and the tools at your disposal. I work digitally. Most of my work is working digitally, but I try to think about how my line art can suggest different textures. With something like cauliflower, there's like a really nice like toasty char that comes with sauteing it. So I use those of you who have a copy, I use a line art tool that allows lots of like cross hatching to suggest that like toasty char in a way that like looks really appealing. This is also like a really like Mediterranean ingredient heavy recipe, so I picked like this really bright like deep blue color to contrast with these warm like creamy like yellowish white and saffron yellow and toasty orange. Like I just really wanted it to pop in a way that helped communicate what the recipe is. So that was a lot of fun, and obviously I was a little whimsical with it, like I had it be in motion because I could. I don't think like illustrations of food have to be perfectly literal all the time, as long as they communicate what the thing is. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess I just asked because I feel like a lot of cookbooks, there's like a photograph of the food, and it's very literal, and you can't always be photorealistic when you are working on color palette. So I personally have a definition of what queer means, and I've also been interested in food for most of my life. But I'm really curious about the definition of queer food. And from the introduction of Queers at the Table, quote, "Queer food fosters connections, defies norms, honors legacies, and is by and for community. This book explores how food could be queer, through its production, through roles in fostering community, and symbolically. The contributing writers and artists engage with themes that are important to queer life, but are interesting to everyone, from our health to our history to agriculture and celebrations. They represent our lives in public and private, our access to food, and our experience of digital media, our communities, and kitchens." And I just thought that was a really beautiful
this is something that when I saw the book as a whole, I was really intrigued at all the different ways it was interpreted, because the production of food has a lot of different components that have been regulated over time, that have been associated with certain people, like certain ways of producing things. There is someone in this book that for whom like the idea of like cooking and making food is a very like gendered activity and chafed at for a long time, trying to figure out how to be a adult who knows how to cook for himself in a way that like affirmed his gender identity was like part of what made food queer. In other ways, it is like how do you make food for a family or to support your health in a way that is like gender or like, you know, not heteronormative. Like how do you keep yourself healthy when you're HIV positive, like with your diet? How do you cook for your polycule, that kind of thing. For me, I think there's just a lot of ways that we are like separated or distanced from the production or the like development of food or how we find our food that has a lot of parallels with I think of how we associate a lot of different things with like our daily life and our things that like make us people and keep us alive, that have a lot of parallels I think with being a person who is queer, that you like interrogate things and you like look into a way of like finding things or making things or eating things that is like not the norm, that also is just, you know, I learned a lot of these things from queer people and I think therefore by association I think of it as queer food. So that's how I approached it myself in this particular instance, but I think there's a lot of ways you can approach that queer food idea that are like just as legitimate and interesting.
Yeah, and even looking at the cover, I mean, that could just be any family, but looking at it, I'm like, this is a queer family. So when you're saying that a queer skill is cooking for the polycule, I was like, feels representative. Did your understanding of queer food change over the course of working on this project?
Yeah, well, when I was initially like introduced to the prompt, I wanted to think about, you know, the first thing I thought of was a way of finding and eating food that was specifically taught to me by like the queer people in my life. Specifically, I mentioned, and they have a cameo in this, my friend Mel Gilman, who was in Columbus, Ohio when this was made and is now based out of like the Bay Area. They and I shared a pandemic hobby of urban foraging, and for me that was something that was really interesting. But when I thought about it more, there's kind of this idea of like finding food and eating food in a way that is, there's an anxiety that often comes with foraging, right? When I talk to people about urban foraging and finding mulberries, finding chicken of the woods and introducing it to people, there's kind of an anxiety that people often have about foraging. They don't want to do it wrong and they don't want to poison themselves, which is, you know, valid. But it kind of reminded me of something that I've heard in like queer communities, also like kink communities, with the idea of like safe sex. This may be familiar to some of you, is the idea of safe sex versus safer sex. The idea is like there's things that you can do to protect yourself, there's things that you can do to be educated and, you know, like think about the consideration of other people who are participating in activity with you. But you can't be like 100% safe. And I feel like there's like an equivalent with food. Like there are, you know, big structural organizations that are in charge of making our food safe, but there are like, you know, in a way that when you're making food for yourself or you're growing your own food, it's really just a matter of making it safer, and there are things that you have to be willing to accept or prepare for when it comes to just like making food or getting food that's not from a grocery store. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way of thinking about this, and it is a similar anxiety that I think a lot of people feel when there's stuff like outside of the norm or outside of structural, like big structures in society. So I don't know, that might be kind of like a out of nowhere connection for people to make, but for me that was like the first thing I thought of.
You're blowing my mind by bringing in like harm reduction, because harm reduction is such a queer value and is such a part of like queer survival and queer thriving. I did not really consider how food, like queer food, is like aligned with harm reduction.
I should say, this is not something I came up with, this is not like a thought of my own head, this is things that have like kind of made connections over time, I'm sure someone has said where.
It's okay, you can still blow my mind if it's not your original thought. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your piece. Thank you for reading it. I love the color washes that you use. It's just very like a rainbow, and then like the very last frame is, you know, the rainbow of like the urban environment, even though we're so lucky to live in Minneapolis. There's like trees and rivers and
So
lakes.
much nature, yeah.
So much nature in the city, but it like still feels very urban, and you're like on your bike. It's very romantic. So foraging is a central theme in your narrative, and I have to admit that I have like a little bit of a troubled relationship with foraging because it feels sometimes like very extractive to me. Like you just go into nature and you pick whatever you want, and then you go home, and then that just like ends your relationship with the environment. It's just like going to the grocery store or something. You don't like think about the farmer that made the food. You just like pick up the food. But I loved that in your piece you didn't really focus on like the extraction. It was more about like highlighting your experiences, identifying, harvesting, processing, and eating plants that were very local to you, and also like you see you like eating with your friends, talking with your friend Mel, like going to different places, and like it looked like you ran into people and they were like, oh, have you seen walnuts yet? Like giving you the hot tip. And so like in that way, I feel like foraging is just like such a great way to learn about your home. And you know, you have indigenous names for plants and animals, like learning about what grows where and processing natural foods. Like all of that really honors the energy that it takes to grow fruit. My favorite panels in your comic were the sketched map
Yeah.
of your neighborhood. I don't know if everyone had a chance to see that slide, but it's like instead of the street names being labeled on the map,
Let's see if I can get back to that.
it's marked with trees and
Oh,
excellent.
hey, there we go.
Yeah, so it's just like it's a different way of like grounding yourself in a place, and it's a different way of navigating your world. And I was just wondering, those are just like my personal thoughts and feelings about foraging. I was just wondering like what inspired you to get into foraging? I mean, we talked earlier and it was like during the pandemic, and your friend Mel, who's like remote from you, it was like your shared hobby. So, like, can you talk more about it?
Yeah, I mean, it is definitely something that started with, I always call it pandemic madness. You know, the hobby that you got during the pandemic where you just like wanted to do something, or you like heard someone talk about it, you're like, I guess I will learn to identify mulberries this month, I guess. Mel went in like all the way and was like so passionate about it and got really interested in becoming knowledgeable about it quickly, which allowed them to introduce ideas to me as well. I have to say, there are a lot of people that you can like find and follow online who do this very like thoroughly. In some ways, I am still kind of like a foraging casual. I have foraged the foolproof 4 mushrooms, but I am reluctant to try the ones that have a lot of easy to mistake lookalikes. But something that stuck with me, I've heard this from Mel, but I've since heard it from other places too. Honestly, I feel like I've also heard about this in Robin Kimmerer's work of braiding sweetgrass. Is the thing with foraging is that you can like come to identify individual plants and things that live in your neighborhood and that you can like expect to pop up every year without fail. There is a tree in my neighborhood that will always have a mushroom pop up, a puffball. They'll always deliver like a big old puffball, like in the late summer, and that's great. But it's not something that you can like live off of exclusively as one person. And it's something that you, as a forager in the community, like you learn that there's an expectation to share. You don't take everything that you find. I think the common etiquette is take 1/10 of what you see. So if you take acorns, if you take mulberries, like take 1 out of every 10 and leave everything else for everybody who uses them. And that includes wildlife, that includes squirrels, that includes everything, and not just other people. That's like a tip that I've seen to like, help that feel like it's something you're sharing. But the thing that really like changed my brain chemistry about it is thinking of this as like a gift, where it's like it's a surprise, it's something that you can, you know, maybe come to expect and anticipate, but whatever you get is like a gift, and it's something that you like are encouraged to not waste and to just, you know, take that for what it is. You can't really take it for granted in a way that I think is often something that you can expect from, say, like the relationship that you have with food and grocery store. I imagine that for like people who are better gardeners than I am, like there probably is like a similar relationship in some respects that you have with like the tomato plant you're gardening. Like, you know, you can cultivate and like improve the yield, but at the end of the day, what you receive is a gift. And that is a really different relationship that I think that we're grown up to experience with food. So that kind of changed my idea with it as well. But yeah, being able to be in a place like a neighborhood or a part of town for a specific amount of time, and being able to recognize like, oh, these, you know, will turn out mulberries, or these are the ones that produce big walnuts, and I kind of know walnut fruit tends to migrate because squirrels will pick them up and then lose interest in them, and they'll like roll around because they're the size of tennis balls. So there's kind of like a fun, slightly unpredictable component to it, but you really do start recognizing plants almost like they're individual people or individual animals, like pets that you know, which is kind of fun.
I also think part of, I'm really glad that you brought up breeding sweetgrass, because I feel like it's almost required breeding if you like live in this area. And I listened to the audiobook read by the author. You can get it at the library. But yeah, she really talks about the gifts and like the reciprocal nature of those gifts. But I think something else you're touching on is like how plants can also help ground you like temporally, like in time. Because I had this year where I was unemployed, and I just like, I answered the question for myself, what would I do if I didn't have anywhere to be? And it was walking by the river. So I would walk by the river like every day, and I got to see like the plants, like, oh, what is that? Oh, it's getting bigger. Like, what is that the next day? What is that the next day? And then, you know, all of a sudden a mushroom pops out or a flower pops out. And so like getting to identify plants before they have their fruit or before they have their flower was like a game for me. And I feel like it really, now if I walk to the river and I see some little sprout, I'm like, I know what comes next. Like I know what's happening down the line.
That's so much fun. Yeah, it's really fun to be able to identify what something is, like before it gets its like telltale whatever it is. I've been trying to do that this year with bellflower, because I want to try and pull it before it gets to the flowering stage. But that's difficult, so I'm working on it.
Bellflower's a naughty one.
Yeah. Yank bellflower, don't
Yeah.
throw it in compost. Yeah.
It's a colonizer. All right. Thank you for this little tangent on foraging. I just know that it's an interest of yours. I noticed your socks. I noticed your shirt.
Oh, yeah. I literally got these, does everyone know where Oddmart is on Lindale? I got them from there.
I love the fashion plug. So, I want to talk about queerness some more. So, for me, queerness is partially about challenging binaries, and I think there are many false binaries in food systems. For example, there's the separation between food producers and food consumers. And it's all, structural. You go to the grocery store, there's like the styrofoam tray with the saran wrap, like you don't really go with it comes with. And also the concept that like some food, maybe like organic food, is for some people, but not for others. In the book, Magers Peralta talks about, you mentioned this earlier, about being an Afro-Latino trans man and how he felt that cooking was a task gendered as for women, so he resented it. But later through a friend, he learns, and this is the story, through a friend, he learns that cooking is a tool of self-sufficiency and it builds community. And Chris Keeve and Kay Green introduced the concept of non-binary botany, which it was new to me, as a way of looking at the natural world without the assumptions of binary sexuality and gender. I wanted to know, how do you challenge binaries as an artist and like in general and within your piece?
Well, something that I feel like I've said for a long time with comics specifically as a medium is that comics are a very conducive medium to tell queer stories. I made a comic for several years that had a main character who I think people look at them and assume like they're a certain way, they use certain pronouns, but like that is a medium where you don't necessarily have to assign pronouns to a character at all. It is a very active medium in that the reader is like infusing a lot of the images and what is given to them with meaning. I often tell people, I tell my students this a lot actually, that comics have less to do with animation or even film than they do with live theater. Like there's a lot of infusing of meaning and stuff that the audience does, and there's an activeness to it in a way that is more active than watching like an animated film or even a film, like which can be quite passive. You're getting everything. You're getting the music, you're getting the sounds, you're getting the pace, like you're even getting the pace of like how long something takes. Whereas with a comic, you can spend as long as you want. I was kind of curating your experience with this, but if you were to sit down and read this yourself, you can spend as long as you want on this panel. You can spend a short amount of time and have that inform how long your time with the story is in a way that I think is very interesting. This is the teacher voice coming out. This is all to say that it also like introduces to you characters or people or figures in this story that can be themselves without having as much of the creator assigning like words to them, like descriptions to them. What you see is what you get in a way that I think is like very like has a lot of cool potential as a medium of queer storytelling. With this specifically, I don't know, I feel like I covered some of that with like talking about like just thinking about food and this idea of like having this other way of interacting with your food is not something that like makes sense to get all of your food this way. Subsistence farming is like kind of extremely difficult, and it's not the worst thing that we don't have to rely on subsistence farming for getting all of our food, but as a supplement to what we get and as a way to just get to know our place that like our place that we live better, like it really enriches our lives in a way that can complement things that we can get readily in a grocery store.
I want to take one of your classes.
It's a lot of that.
Yeah, I want to hear your lectures on the activeness of comics. That's cool. Are there other ways that this book has like challenged how you think about binaries within food or food systems? There's a lot in there.
I mean, there were a lot of ways that people approach this prompt that I hadn't thought about. A lot having to do with health. There was a really interesting one. Let me see if I can get the person's name specifically. was the idea of food being a way that someone connects with a dear friend who's passed away and is no longer there, in a way that is like very visceral. Like food can be an instant connection to someone who isn't there anymore. There's someone, Nicole George, who talks about their relationship with like being vegan and like just this idea of like how they think about their connection to animals in the natural world in a way that is like really, really important to them. And for them, this kind of like division between like sharing the world with animals and, you know, finding ways to stay alive without relying on their like, you know, exploiting them like is really important to them. And that's something that is like not how I live, and I didn't like make that connection, but I read that, I was like, you know, I get it, like that makes a lot of sense. So I thought that was really interesting to see all these ways that people live and take these aspects of like food is such a big part of how we interact with the world. Like there are foods we can't eat, there are foods we won't eat, there are like foods that we don't have access to for various reasons, and that can like substantially change how we live from day to day, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, if you haven't picked up the book yet, there's a lot in there, and all of the pieces are very short, so you can read it in a very non-linear fashion.
Yeah.
I first just kind of paged through until I saw something pretty, and then read through it, and I got a lot out of it. Thank you for answering that question. I think I have one last question. So there are over 30 pieces of art and writing by over 35 authors and artists in this book. It's broken up into 5 chapters, including history, community, health, ecology, and recipes. It's really fun to just, like I said, read in a really non-linear fashion. Where would you start if you were just like gonna pick a couple of your favorites? If you didn't have time to read the whole book, like what would you highlight for us?
Oh, that's tough. I mean, I am, I guess, biased in that I knew some of these artists before. I've known their work or I met them in person. Tara Avery, who she did the comic about like making food, especially like baking bread for her family. Like she and I know each other as comics acquaintances, and I really like the way that she talked about making like Chinese style milk bread. That was really fun, especially because I love that kind of milk bread. I was like, ooh, I should make some of that this week. Ronnie Sohm, who I believe hers is the first comic in the anthology. I've been a fan of her work for a long, long, long time. She's like part of the South Asian diaspora, and she always has really interesting ways of like talking about her connection to like being like an urbane, like North American lady, but also having these connections to like visiting family back home, and like how that connects with food, how that connects with like culture. And she also just has a very like clean, very precise like inking style that is like really nice to look at. So those are really fun. I always like seeing the people I know get work, but it's just really solid overall. And also like if you just want a new recipe, like just hop into a recipe. There are some good ones that are pretty accessible and easy to try.
Sorry, that was a hard question. Pick your favorite child.
Oh, like do you want me to pick a one?
No, I'm just kidding. So is there anything else that you'd like to say about Cruise at the Table?
It was just a really great experience to reflect on a time where I got to like was trying to stay in touch with a lot of my friends and just trying to get to know more about my city and what was like important to like the place where I lived. And I don't know, like talking about things that happened during the pandemic often feels strange. Like everybody kind of had their own thing, and you know, let's be honest, like a lot of us came out of the pandemic trans, so there's also a like very queer, like a queer component to the pandemic. So being able to reflect on it in a broader context made me feel a little more like I was doing stuff on purpose and not just like stumbling through a weird time in my life. So I don't know, it was nice reflecting on things in that way.
Pandemic was trans.
Oh my gosh, so many people I know came out trans. Like that was like a very like clear thing for a lot of people.
I love that.
Mhm.
I love that. Before we open it up to Q&A, I just wanted to plug another queer event that is happening.
Yes.
That's happening this weekend. On Friday, there's the Midwest Queer Trans Zine Fest Conference. And on Saturday and Sunday, there's the Midwest Queer Trans Zine Fest. It's happening at Open Book from 12 to 5 both days. We have a bunch of zine creators from all over the Midwest. I think about 50% of the people are from out of town, so you'll probably get to see people that you wouldn't otherwise get to see. And there's a whole bunch of free workshops that are happening during that time. If you have any questions, I'd love to talk about it after this. Does anyone have any questions for Blue about Queers at the Table?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When you were thinking about how to respond to the prompt and coming up with your idea of like proceeding with the story, did you have other things that you were kind of thinking about doing that you kind of decided, no, this is like the route that I need to go with this?
I feel like I hopped onto this one right away because I could connect it to friends and people that I knew who were like queer, and for me it was like hard to disentangle them in that way. You know, I could put in cameos from like my friends and my wife and my dog, and that was like, that just felt very effortless
Yeah.
in a way that was easy for me. I'm trying to remember. I don't think I had a plan B, so I'm glad that editors went with this. That's great when that happens. Yeah, I the only thing that I can think of that I like did a couple of iterations of was the coloring style. This was a experiment, this like kind of bled out coloring style. I worked with limited color before, not quite like this. I have to admit one of my influences was a Game Boy Color game I really liked when I was a kid called Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons. Anyone played this? Very, very like season in focused colored palette when I was just trying to think of like, how do I show things like going from season to season in a way that felt smooth, but that I didn't have to like get a lot of like fiddly little color bits in there. And I just like, I don't know, I was just experimenting with brushes. So that I feel like I did more back and forth on the original story where I felt like it was good to go.
I do love your unconventional use of rainbow.
Yeah.
Like, we've all seen the rainbow as a symbol of queer, but I love the like different color washes and then like the kind of rainbow that you did. And I also noticed that the cover is also rainbow.
Yeah, I wanted to try and like have the, for covers especially where that's like maybe one person's like only interaction with a book ever, trying to figure out how to communicate that concept but in a way that was like a little more fresh and interesting. Having each individual be a different color was kind of fun, because I got to like kind of think about like what kind of person would get each one. I don't know, I didn't think about it too hard. There is like kind of like the young like baby queer like down in the corner with like all the pony bee bracelets. I was like, well yeah, they'll get pink, I guess. I didn't think about the ones, but it was really fun. To be honest, it was much more fun thinking about what the food would be.
Yeah.
I was kind of talking to Lo about this, but when I was trying to figure out what would be on the table, it was just what had I eaten lately that I really enjoyed. There were some like Taiwanese dumplings that I tried making where the dough is like made green with spinach juice. That was really good. There's a cheese corn mochi. That's my like Thanksgiving recipe staple. If you want to try that, Sola El Whaley's recipe is the one that I use. It's so good. And then I don't know. I just like tea, salad. Like I think I paid homage to the big puffy like milky bread. Yeah, that was more I guess stream of consciousness of like what have I eaten recently that's good.
Any other questions?
Since it is food related, is there a like favorite recipe that you go to, whether like when reading it or like is a favorite to make? No, just in general.
Oh, just in general. It got me thinking about things that I've made foraging. And the thing is like so much of them take a while to prepare, so it's not like you can just sit down and make acorn jelly. But I will say as a multi-year project, figuring out the trick for making acorn flour, making acorn jelly is something I'm very pleased with. It is, would anyone object if I like talked about processing acorns for the next like 5 minutes? So okay, so here's the thing with acorns is you can just take acorns off the ground, you know, take a reasonable amount, like 1 out of every 10. And then here are the steps that I recommend for processing acorns. First of all, acorns usually have little hitchhikers in them, at least like up in a couple of them. So you set them out on a tray, like a baking tray, and then you wait for acorn weevils to wiggle their way out of the shells. You'll like hear them like wiggling around. It kind of sounds like it's like raining outside. So you just kind of wait for them to like make their way out, and then you can dispose of them however you want. I guess you can put them outside, that just makes more of them, so, you know.
Chickens love them.
Yeah, give them to your chickens, if you have chickens. And then, you crack them open. I did this with a hammer and a mortar and pestle, and I would say if you have a nutcracker, use that instead. And then you have the nut part. That's something where, you mash it up, or if you have like a Cuisinart, like a really nice grinder, don't use a crappy grinder, like that will break it immediately. But if you have like a decent quality grinder, grind it down into, it'll be a slightly damp meal, like a flour. Then you put it in a big jar. Like I have a big old mason jar that I think I might have gotten from like Joann's at some point the last couple of years. And you fill it with water, and then you leave it time to leach. Acorns have tannins in them that make them like really bitter and unpleasant to eat if you don't leach them. So you let it leach, it'll turn all the water brown, and then you just like pour out the water, put in fresh water until it turns clear. There will also be this like little layer of like powdery white that forms on the top. That's the starch. Don't throw that away. Let that like leach into its own container, and then when your flour doesn't make the water brown anymore, then you can get it in a cheesecloth or a dish towel. You know, you don't have to be super fancy here. Squeeze it dry, let it air dry or dehydrate it in your oven. Lots of people's ovens have like dehydrate settings, so you can do that. And then you can use it for bread. I do recommend, if you make an acorn bread, cut it with regular flour to make it a little more puffy. It's also gluten-free, so if you're making any bread recipe, find gluten-free bread recipes and it'll work a little better. Like it'll have a little more, like, it can be quite flat and firm. So you need something like xanthan gum to just like make it a little more puffed up. The starch can be made into a acorn jelly that is a really fun little side. It's just, I think it's just water and an ingredient I'm forgetting, but it's like a natural gelatin.
Pectin.
Pectin, that sounds right. Thank you. But yeah, that's really fun if you're doing like a Korean style like pangchang little sauce on top. Yeah, and it keeps really well. Like you can freeze it for a long time. You can pull some out. You can mix it. I've made brownies. I've made bread. It's great. It just takes a couple months of doing various steps to have a fun ingredient that you serve to your friends and they're like, oh, okay.
Just talking about like
It is good.
eat it in 2 seconds.
I love that we're having an impromptu skill share. Any other questions for Blue?
Thank you for the questions you've had so far, by the way. I know it can be like tough to be put on the spot and ask questions, so it's fun to like hear from you. If there aren't any other questions, can I like make one more call to action as long as we're doing that sort of thing? First of all, if you picked up books here today, thank you so much for doing that. If you want to do one more thing that is like really local and is like a cool way to get involved. So one of the other things I started doing during the pandemic is volunteer at Joyce Uptown Food Shelf. Raise your hand if you know it. It is a food shelf that serves South Minneapolis and has been since the late 60s. Believe it or not, they have had a huge jump in shoppers the last couple of years, especially. I believe the number of shoppers has gone up over 100% in the last year, and they could use volunteers and donations. If you want, I'm gonna have one of these up at the signing table to get more involved. They're so nice. They're literally have a bodega style like shopping way for people to get the food that they want. They can take emergency bags without appointments, and I consider this, first of all, it's good to do stuff involving your community. This is also like definitely a queer food thing. Anecdotally, many of the shoppers are like queer people who are coming from other states to move here. And that is something that you can do to support queer people in your neighborhood. And it's just a really cool organization. I love volunteering there. So that's the other thing. And the Midwest Queer and Trans Youth Fest. It's generally really fun.
Thank you, Blue. We'll just take a little break. Blue will move over to the signing table if you have any books for them to sign. Thank you for coming, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you.